Good afternoon, dear friends. We are continuing to analyze the situation on the front lines in our daily format. Today, negotiations between the United States and Ukraine are starting in Saudi Arabia. One of the key questions to be discussed there is what territorial concessions Ukraine might be willing to make to reach some kind of peace agreement. I expect there will be many statements and a lot of news today, so we'll be monitoring the developments closely. Meanwhile, we continue our work, studying the situation on the front. Let's open the map together. 3 days have passed since the beginning of the offensive in the Kursk region, and here are the results so far. March 8, the Russian army regained control of 41 km. March 9, an additional 87 km were brought under control. Yesterday, another 43 km were secured. In total, over the past 3 days, the Russian army has regained control of more than 170 km of territory. The offensive is ongoing, and Ukrainian armed forces troops continue to surrender en masse. For example, just yesterday in the area of Ivashkovsky village, 24 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered. Later, in the area of Myrnoyi village, another group of about 20 soldiers laid down their arms. Additionally, in the agronom farmstead area, 4 more soldiers were captured. I also published footage showing Ukrainian troops fleeing toward the Sumy region. And not just 1 or 2 soldiers, whole groups of about 10 people were seen running. There's also footage showing AFU soldiers running down the road and taking cover in a building in Gogolevka village, which is located near the Sumy region border. About 20 soldiers ran into the building, but shortly after, it was hit, and none of them survived. I'm sharing all this so that you understand the atmosphere and the overall situation. After 3 days of fighting, the AFU still has not been able to establish any coordinated defense. There are isolated pockets of resistance. For example, fighting in Myrnoyi lasted for about a day. Interestingly, at the very beginning of the battle for Myrnoyi, an entire Ukrainian platoon of about 40 soldiers abandoned their positions and fled. Nevertheless, the remaining Ukrainian garrison managed to hold out for a full day. Only by yesterday evening did they abandon their positions at the local airfield and cottage settlement, retreating toward Sudza. Thus, Myrnoyi has returned to Russian control, and the position of Ukrainian forces in Sudza has worsened even further. If you look at the map, you'll see that Myrnoyi is practically adjacent to Sudza. Its capture effectively marks the beginning of the battle for the eastern part of the city. The areas are essentially part of the same urban agglomeration. That's why Ukrainian forces continue to retreat toward the Sumy region. They realize that they won't be able to establish a serious line of defense here. Sudza is already surrounded from 3 sides. From the north, the industrial zone is under Russian control. From the east, fighting is ongoing in Second Nyazivo. From the south, clashes are continuing. Yesterday morning, Ukrainian forces still held control over Agronom and Kalmykov farmstead, but by midday, they had lost both positions. The situation is developing rapidly in northern Sudza. A Ukrainian garrison of about 120 soldiers is now completely surrounded. Moving further north, Russian forces have advanced from Cherkaskoy toward Porekhnaya in the west. After capturing the village, Russian troops moved into Ivashkovsky and also secured the Ivashkovsky forest to the west of the village. As I mentioned at the beginning of this report, this resulted in a mass surrender by Ukrainian soldiers. 13 AFU soldiers surrendered in this area alone. I published footage of them, but that's only what was caught on camera. The actual number of captured soldiers may be higher. The Russian Ministry of Defense will likely provide the official figures later. After securing Ivashkovsky, Russian forces advanced to the railway line. From there, they struck at the Zazalevka farmstead, where Ukrainian forces had been holding defensive positions, but the Ukrainian defenses quickly collapsed. As a result, the entire area, which is marked as a gray zone on American maps, is no longer contested. Russian forces have effectively established control over this territory. Let's switch to another map. This is a Russian map, which in this case is more accurate because this entire area, right up to Kazakh-Yalaknya, is under firm Russian control. Footage from today already shows Russian forces calmly walking around Zazalevka without any signs of tension, which clearly indicates that this is a secure zone under Russian control. Regarding Kazakh-Yalaknya itself, for the past 2 days, Ukrainian forces have reportedly been holding the defense there. At least that's what Ukrainian military analysts have been claiming, although they were somewhat misleading. Technically, you could say they were holding the defense, but in reality, they were simply surrounded because Kutkin and Zorievka were already under Russian control. Yes, some fighting took place there, but the Ukrainian side had no real ability to maneuver. Moreover, Russian forces advanced into Bogdanovka from the north. You can see it here on the map, and fighting also occurred to the south, in Second Nyazevo. Thus, Kazakh-Yalaknya was surrounded on 3 sides. In order to retreat westward, Ukrainian forces would have needed to cross the Laknya River, which surrounds the entire settlement. However, the bridges there have been destroyed. Even if they somehow managed to cross the river under fire, whether by vehicle or on foot, they would have faced an open and completely exposed field stretching for kilometers. It would have been a different story if the terrain had been similar to the forested areas near Ivashkovsky or Bogdanovka and Second Nyazevo, but here, it's all open ground. Ukrainian forces have a tendency to find themselves in mini-cauldron situations, and this time was no different. After 2 days of fighting, just as I was recording this update, reports came in that part of the Ukrainian garrison in Kazakh-Yalaknya had voluntarily surrendered. The remaining soldiers attempted to escape across the fields last night. How many of them survived remains unclear. In any case, the capture of Kazakh-Yalaknya is a significant step toward taking Sudza. Now, as you can see on the map, Russian forces have opened up a broad front toward the city from the north. In the first part of this report, I already mentioned that Sudza is surrounded on 3 sides, but now, the blockade has become even more solid. In the Kursk region, Ukrainian forces attempted only one counterattack over the past 3 days. This took place in the south, where they advanced toward the Kolosok recreation base. You can see it here on the map. However, even Ukrainian sources reported that this attack ended disastrously. About 70 Ukrainian soldiers were killed, and those who survived retreated back toward Gavo. If we move north from Gavo, we see that after cutting off the second supply road, Russian forces are advancing toward Oleshna, a village located right on the border with the Sumy region. Currently, Russian positions are only 3 km from the village. The situation is changing by the day, sometimes even by the hour. Just as I was recording this report, this major development about Kazakh-Yalaknya came through. I honestly didn't expect Ukrainian forces to give up Kazakh-Yalaknya so quickly, especially since they had been trying to fortify it into a defensive stronghold. It seems that at this point, no one really cares about holding the line anymore, which gives hope that Sudza will also fall quickly. A few words about the situation in Shevchenko. This is already in the Pokrovsk direction, not the Kursk region but Donetsk. There, Ukrainian forces continue to press hard, attempting to push Russian troops out of the village. The situation remains difficult, and the main fighting is now concentrated on Kalinova Street, where the clashes are particularly intense. The guys on the Pokrovsk front urgently need a vehicle for evacuating the wounded. They are in desperate need of support, especially now when Ukrainian forces are putting maximum pressure on them. If you want to help, the donation details are listed at the top. Any amount will make a difference. That's the current situation on the front lines for today. I'm sure there will be more updates soon because the front is collapsing rapidly, and even heavily fortified areas like Kazakh-Yalaknya are falling surprisingly quickly. That's all for now. Wishing you a productive day, and I'll see you tomorrow.